Now, the Prime Minister has rejected demands for a national inquiry into the rape gang scandal and denied watering down plans for 5 local inquiries.
Well, in a GBNews exclusive, a retired police officer has told Charlie Peters he was threatened after conducting a 3-month investigation into abuse in Bradford.
Oh, here's what Charlie uncovered.
A career crime fighter threatened with arrest for tracking down child abusers. This is former Detective Chief Inspector John Pikes. In Oldham, he had tackled trafficking and exploitation, but working for a charity after leaving the force in 2008, he wanted to see if this problem was widespread.
I got a map of the northwest and I closed my eyes and stuck a pin in, and it landed at an address in Bradford. We looked around that area and found a children's home. I went down to the location and identified a great property where we could observe the activities around that children's home. And we then ran a series of observations over several months.
John said he saw multiple incidents of children being taken from the home.
Sometimes these girls would just be gone for a few hours, but quite often they didn't come back that night or even the next morning. And we'd see police cars parked up 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, clearly taking reports of missing children. And on one occasion, we followed a vehicle that had driven just about a mile down the road. We couldn't see the girl in the passenger seat. We thought, has she got out? There was nowhere to go, yet the girl wasn't in the car. I walked straight past. He was just sat in the car waiting. And as I'm walking back up, I saw a head pop up from the driver's side of the vehicle, a little head from his lap. Sorry. I felt really incensed because I'd missed something really obvious there. Excuse me, one. I'd missed it. This to me showed me that we had a real problem here.
So after 3 months of gathering this information, what did you try and do with it?
We wanted to try and move this forward. We had contacts in Bradford that led us to the bishop, who agreed to host a meeting for us to make a presentation to children's charities, and he also invited the local police. The representative from one of the children's charities said, everybody knows this is what goes on in children's homes. It goes on across the country. How can this be going on all over the country and we're not doing anything about it? The next day, I attended a meeting with this senior member of the social services, and sat next to her was a uniformed chief inspector. And she said, I understand you've been following our children. I said, I've not been following your children. I've been following the people that I believe have been exploiting, taking advantage of your children. She said, if you continue to follow our children, I'm going to have you arrested. I just couldn't believe what was going on. I couldn't believe that I was being told by this person who's supposed to be looking after the children, the children's interests, that she was going to arrest me. I was about 10 minutes down the road from this meeting and my phone rang, and it was a voice I recognised. He introduced himself to me and told me that he was now a senior police officer at Bradford. And he said, John, what are you doing? Don't you realise how much work our officers have put into stabilising this community? And what you're doing is likely to create a massive right-wing backlash that will burn parts of our town. He says, don't you see what you're doing? I mean, I didn't really, because even though I thought maybe some of these individuals might be Pakistani, it never occurred to me that this was an issue of race. It was an issue of child abuse.
Well, with us now in the studio is GBNews national reporter Charlie Peters. Good to see you this morning, Charlie. And that is a really powerful, emotional interview.
Yeah, speaking up for the first time since this happened in 2008, when he left the force, went up to Bradford to conduct that investigation, but very quickly found there was a serious problem. And as he says, local officials and police officers not taking it as seriously over fears that John Pikes says were around community cohesion. They feared, he says, that after the 2001 race riots in Bradford, that dealing with this issue head-on, speaking about it publicly, tackling it sufficiently would cause that sort of crisis. And his testimony comes, of course, as this national debate rages on about grooming gang inquiries. The government saying in January they were going to do 5. They've been accused of watering that down this week, saying they're going to do flexible, locally led work, not necessarily 5 inquiries. But then yesterday they changed their position, said we're going to do more than 5. Home Office sources telling GBNews that they were committed to that plan in January. It has been a difficult communications rollercoaster for the government on these grooming gangs. And as they're trying to put out their stall, put out their position, we are getting more and more information from locals, from people who were engaged in dealing with this crisis about efforts, they say, to cover it up over the years. This sort of testimony, I think, is going to continue, particularly from Bradford, which has never had an inquiry.
But you say it's a sort of difficult roller coaster, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
I mean, it should be very straightforward, shouldn't it? National inquiry where they've got the necessary legal standing to compel witnesses to come forward and see what's going on across the country.
Well, the government say they don't want a national inquiry. The most effective way is locally led inquiries. They said they're going to have a barrister called Tom Crowther developing a framework in January to do that. He's since said that he's not been involved in developing that framework whatsoever and that ministers have taken over it. We don't know what that's going to look like.
Message and said, do you still need
Do
me?
you still want me? He had to text a Home Office official. There are questions currently with the Home Office sent from the Select Committee asking them how much of that communication was conducted via text, because this barrister had to say, actually, you really should be emailing me so we can keep a proper record of this. Now, Tom Crowther is saying that not enough action has taken place in terms of developing that framework. He clearly is asking for more information. The government say they're going to have these 5 inquiries now, but we just don't know where they're going to be because they are opt-in. Local areas have to agree to have them. And as you say, Stephen, they won't necessarily have the powers to compel witnesses and compel evidence to come forward.
Charlie, I'm not sure if you're going to know the answer to this, but do you remember, I'm sure you do, Yvette Cooper talking about the ICSA inquiry recommendations? She said she'd lay out a time frame for when they're going to be implemented by Easter. Do we know if that's happened yet?
It hasn't.
Are we still waiting?
They said in January they were going to commit to all of them.
Yeah.
They set out 3 that they were going to do at a time. Alexis J in 2022 made 20. Yesterday, Angela Rayner very interestingly said 17, I think referring to the other 17 to go on the 3 that they made in January. Maybe Angela Rayner doesn't know this, but actually on Wednesday, one of her ministers in the Ministry of Justice, Alex Davies-Jones, dropped one of those recommendations in response to the government's compensation scheme. Alexis J said there should be an increased time limit for compensation for victims of sexual abuse from 2 years to 7 years, and that any convictions that a child had experienced during that process should not be involved in reducing their claim. The government rejected those findings the first day of Easter recess. We reported on it right away with some quite stark reaction from lawyers involved in this case, saying that this was too hard and so they'd swept it under the carpet. So the government said they'd do all the recommendations in January. So far they've outlined 3, but dropped 1.
OK. Charlie, for now, thanks very much indeed. We'll see you later on. Meanwhile, in response to the interview Charlie did, the West Yorkshire Police spokesperson has said, we've searched our systems and can find no meeting or report of child sexual exploitation made by this person since the publication of the J report in 2014. West Yorkshire Police has taken a proactive stance in exploring previous incidents and disclosures relating to non-recent child sexual exploitation and abuse. Bradford Council has been contacted for comment. Let's talk to the Shadow Minister for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Robbie Moore. Good to see you this morning. I know it's away from your brief, but I want to ask you about the rape gangs issue, because it seems to have been extraordinarily mixed messaging from the government on this over the last week. What should we be doing at this stage?
Well, the government absolutely need to implement a full national inquiry into this absolutely heinous crime of rape gangs that has unfortunately taken place across the country, including areas like I represent in Keighley and across the Bradford district. What we've seen over the last week is a complete misstep by the government, going completely against what they announced in January earlier this year, where they've been very all over the place with these 5 additional local inquiries that they said that they would be announced. They've reduced the amount of money that would be specifically allocated to them. And the government need to do the right thing. They just need to implement a national inquiry with immediate effect.
Why do you think they're continuing to resist a national inquiry? I mean, looking at your constituency, Keighley and Bradford, I mean, it's never had an inquiry.
No, despite not only myself, but previous MP Anne Cryer calling for it. We need a local focus on the areas like Bradford that are encompassed within that national inquiry, because I speak to many of those victims, many of those survivors, not only from Keighley, but the wider Bradford district, that have experienced some of the most horrendous, gut-wrenching crimes, not only to them, but other people that they know. And those that have been covering this up, that have been refusing to acknowledge this being even an issue, are getting away with it. And therefore, we have to have the government step in when you have local authorities like mine, like the Bradford district, that are refusing to instigate their own inquiry. The government must do the right thing, step in, provide that reassurance so that justice can be delivered for those many victims.